Welcome, everybody, to number 106 of the Circle of Wine Writers. Let's talk about sessions. And today we are talking about Coravin, celebrating a decade of innovation in wine technology with Greg Lambrecht. The series was founded during COVID in 2020 and has now, as I say, about 106 presentations. I'd like to extend a welcome to those of you who are joining us for the first time, either members or non-members. The Circle was founded in 1960 in the UK and has around 270 members, wine writers, broadcasters, educators, and other professional communicators based across the world. 50% in the UK and now 50% elsewhere. There's more information about the Circle on our website if you'd like to join, or if you'd also like to be added to the guest list for these events, then please do email and we'll add you to the list. I'd now like to hand you over to our chair, Meg Maker, who will introduce Greg Lambrecht, our speaker today. Over to you, Meg.
Great. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you all for joining us. We're really happy to see so much interest in this topic, which I think affects all of us in the wine industry. I think all of us have bumped up against Coravin at some point, if not used one on a daily basis. So Greg is an engineer by training. He has 2 degrees from MIT, first a bachelor's in nuclear engineering with a focus on plasma fusion, and a master's in mechanical engineering. And he began his career in medical technologies at Pfizer, where he helped develop therapeutic devices. It's better to use them than it is to try to say it, for vascular applications. And so Greg is also a wine lover. And in 1999, he got the glimmer of an idea and started putting 2 and 2 together to prototype a device that would eventually become the Coravin. Coravin formally became a company in 2013, and now 11 years on, Greg is here to share a few things that he's learned along the way with us. So Greg, over to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. Thanks to the Circle of Wine Writers. Thanks to my wonderful team. Laura Walker, who's joining us today, is a representative of a wonderful team that enables me as a wine lover to explore this incredible world with Coravin. I would never be able to do it without them. I'm Greg, founder and inventor of Coravin, actually 11 years now in the world of wine, and I wanted to give you my own very distorted perspective of what wine and Coravin have allowed me to see about this incredible world of fine wine and wine in general. So thanks for letting me write this presentation. I did write this exclusively for you guys, and so there may be mistakes, and I apologize for that in the beginning. I'm an engineer, a physicist, and a dyslexic, so my spelling is catastrophic. Just very quickly on background, I fell in love with wine when I was 16, illegally. I can now say that I think statute of limitations is over. I was in California. I drove with some friends up to Napa Valley from Newport Beach in the South. And I walked into this man's winery. This is Tony Peju before he passed away. And Tony served me my first glass of wine. And I absolutely fell in love with it. This is the moment, that photograph of Tony and myself, when I was introducing Coravin to him, and I told him this story, and he was notably upset, as you can see him wagging his finger at me accusingly. But, you know, he changed my life. There's 140,000 different bottles of wine made every year. They change every year that they're in the bottle. And what I loved about wine was that I had this infinite Rubik's Cube of smells and tastes that I could explore. This was my wine rack back in 1988. I had about 40 different bottles. Many of them were categorized as too good to drink. I do work in medicine. Surgeons had given me wine. They would say one of 2 things: too good to drink, or it's not yet ready. Try this again in 5 years, or try this in 5 years. And so I didn't know what it wasn't ready meant, and I didn't know what too good to drink meant. And so, you know, I became frustrated that I purchased a bottle, or was given a bottle in this 750 milliliter format. I consume it by the glass, but in order to drink that glass, I had to commit to the entire bottle, whether I wanted that full bottle or not, whether the wine was ready or not, whether it's a wine that my spouse wanted or not, or whether it was a wine that my friends wanted or not. It was just open. And so I found that there were a lot of compromises being made. What bottle to open, when to open it, wines for during the week, wines for at the end of the week. What I was willing to open during the week was what I was willing to throw away or cook with. What I was opening at the end of the week was wine that I wanted to enjoy, or when friends were over, and so if they loved wine as well. So I knew that there was something that was going wrong, and I also wanted to learn faster. I wanted to be able to taste wine side by side, taste, Chardonnay from California and from Western Australia and from Bordeaux, from Burgundy, and I wanted to taste wines from all over the world and see what they tasted side by side. And I certainly wasn't doing that at home. I wasn't doing that with a wife who only liked Piemontese grapes. And I was waiting for this perfect moment to do it with friends. And so I was frustrated. And then my wife became pregnant again with our second child and stopped drinking completely. So I was completely frustrated. And I have a way of inventing that comes from the medical world, where when you're frustrated, the best thing you can do is write down the unmet need that you're experiencing. And so having taught how to invent new medical therapies at Harvard and Stanford, and having been involved in medical device innovation since I was 23, I had helped develop a process called the biodesign process, where we could schedule invention. And it started with this characterization of the unmet need. I always found that a unique perspective on the unmet need was the true invention. It wasn't necessarily the new technology, but it's the new perspective on the problem. And so up until I invented the idea of Coravin, the solution that everybody was trying to address was how to preserve an open bottle of wine for longer. Once it's open, how do I get it to last for more days? And that was Vacuvin, spray cans, and Enomatic, and all these different things that would try to extend the life of the wine. But that wasn't what I wanted. I certainly wasn't going to open 5 or 6 different wines on a Tuesday to taste side by side and then hopefully drink through those. I wanted to do pairing. I wanted to do different wines every night of the week. I wanted to explore more. And so I wrote this down: a way to drink wine from any bottle I own, any day of the week, any quantity I want, without having to think about when I'm going to drink from that bottle again. That was what I wanted. I wanted complete freedom to taste and drink what I had. And so luckily, as you heard in my bio, I'm a biomedical engineer. I started off inventing for J&J in college, the protected peripheral IV catheter, something that I worked on. And then I developed a chemotherapy and medicine infusion system called a port. It's an implant that goes underneath your skin, and you would access it with a needle over and over again during the course of somebody's therapy. And so I got very good at making needles that didn't do damage to things. And so you can imagine me in my kitchen with a bottle of wine and a needle, thinking there's got to be a way I can get wine out of here with this. And so I tried what every surgeon has done. I stuck a needle into the cork and I used a syringe and tried to suck it out, but vacuum caused it to suck right back. And so I'm a physicist as well, plasma physicist. So I knew, okay, I could use an inert gas and I could push the wine out of the bottle so that no air gets in. And what you're seeing there is the very second prototype of Coravin. What I have here in my hand, I'll stop sharing for a second, is the very first prototype of Coravin. This is Coravin number 1. Now you can see why we hired people to do design and development, because you're never going to sell this. But it's a needle, it's a valve. I would push this button and inert gas would come through this regulator, go into the bottle, pressurize the bottle, and then I would let go of this button and wine would pour out of here into my glass. The very first night that I invented this, I drank 5 different wines. The second night, I had another 5. Third night, another 5. And so I was over the moon enthusiastic with this change for me. I didn't at the time think that it was for anybody else. This is the way I wanted to drink. Everybody finishes the bottle. I don't. I was drinking by the glass. But friends started to see it and ask for them. And they asked if it worked. Now, unfortunately, we don't have any images of me while I started doing the testing to determine whether it worked with still wine, with Coravin. But we do have pictures of me when we were developing Coravin Sparkling. And so this is, by the way, how I spent my pandemic. But it was a model of how I developed Coravin. I would buy half a case of wine. I would Coravin a glass out of the first bottle on day 1 with a certain needle, a certain gas, and a certain pressure. And then I would come back to another bottle a month later and blind taste the 2. to see if there was change, if I could tell a difference. And then I would come back at 6 months and add a third bottle and blind taste. I would come back at a year, add a fourth bottle, blind taste. I would come back at 2 years, fifth bottle, and then at 5 years, the final bottle. And I would blind taste wines from all over the world, of all different styles, of all different vintages, going back to 1961, to see whether or not Coravin impacted the wine over the course of 5 years. And so we recently launched Coravin Sparkling, and this is me during the pandemic, testing it on everything I could get my hands on during the pandemic, which was a really extraordinary and wonderful experience, a good way to pass a pandemic. And so, I tested it on Prosecco, and you can see in the middle there, Nani Prosecco, which was actually the lowest pressure that we measured. In here somewhere, there's a bottle of Chandon, which was the highest pressure that we ever measured. We started working with different pressures, different styles of wine, just like we had done way back, I had done way back in the early 2000s as I was developing prototypes of the original Coravin. So that's how I do the testing. 5 glasses, blind tasting. I don't know how many glasses are from the bottle that was previously Coravin or from the one that's just been accessed. I don't know which one, and I've got to see if I can find it. It's a very good blind tasting method with about a 4 to 5% random chance guess rate. And so that was the fact that it worked, and the fact that I kept making more and more of these things for my friends, who then wanted them for their friends, meant that there was a need here that wasn't just me experiencing, it wasn't just my need. It was a need that the world of wine was experiencing. And so a friend of mine literally dragged me by the ear to a bank and wrote a check to the company and said, "We're founding a company today." And so I did. I still have my day job. I still spend half my time in medicine, as I have since 2011, and half my time in the Coravin. But when we founded, I always like to have a mission. And we wrote down a couple of things. One was, we're going to revolutionize the way that the world experiences wine. Nice to set a lofty mission. And what we're going to do is we're going to enable wine by the glass without compromise. And I also wrote this down. We're going to do by the glass, faster, easier, more fun, independent of closure, still or sparkling. So we were going to work with cork and screw cap, and we were going to work with Vinalock, and we were going to work with champagne and Prosecco, and we were going to work with old wines and young. We were going to find a way that if somebody wanted a glass of wine, without compromise, they could have it. And if they wanted to come back to that wine months or years later, they could. That was the founding mission. So this is who we are today. Pretty simple product line. We have Coravin Timeless, which is the original needle-based system. We have Coravin Sparkling, which is what we use for champagne and sparkling wines. And then we've got Coravin Pivot, which is really a system that we developed largely for the restaurant world, who is demanding faster pour, less gas use, and less training. And I'm going to spend 2 seconds demonstrating what these are, maybe a minute or two, demonstrating how these things work. First, by pouring me a glass of champagne. This is a wine by a friend. This is Fare Creuset. They make about 20,000 bottles under 3 different names. These right next to Salos in a very similar style. Coravin Sparkling is the easiest thing we've made. You open the bottle like you normally would. You pour it like you normally would. So you just remove the cork, pour like you normally would, like so. And I'm going to pour myself a glass of Fare Creuset. Producer I very much like. They also make non-dosage 4 gram and 8 gram, which was a great learning experience for me as a champagne lover. So you pour as much as you like. We use a stopper. Simply place the stopper on top. In between pours, that's all you do. It's a very special stopper in that it does look big, but it only adds about 1 centimeter to the top of the bottle, so you should still fit in a normal wine fridge. The stopper fits on any bottle, from a half bottle to most magnums. So it'll fit Krug, it'll fit Gosset, it'll fit Ain. That took us 2 years. And then we use a special material, because I am working in medicine, that does not allow any oxygen in or any CO2 out, even over a year. So it's a very impermeable material, not like silicon, which is an open window to oxygen. Then we've got a charger. that restores the perlage on the inside of the bottle, protects the perlage. And it does so by injecting pure CO2 gas. It has a little indicator. I push down, that indicator goes from green to red while it's charging, back to green when it's charged. And that's it. You're done. So that's Coravin Sparkling. We launched it in 2021. We're now seeing great champagnes on the Buy the Glass list of restaurants all over the world, which is wonderful. Cheers. Then we did Timeless, which is the wine that you're all familiar with. I'm going to pour a very special bottle to me. This is one of those bottles that was in my first tests. It's not a particularly notable producer or wine. This is Thorn Clark Shotfire Ridge 2002. But when I was originally developing Coravin, this was one of my first test bottles. And so written on the back are all of my notes on the needle I use, the gas I use, the pressures I use. This is Argon, a 19 gauge needle. It was first poured on January 9th of 2005. So this is the oldest remaining bottle of previously Coravin wine, almost 20 years ago. So this is Timeless now. I take it, place it on top of the cork, press the needle through the cork, sort of nervous and excited at the same time. I tip the bottle sideways so that the wine's touching the needle. I press the trigger, gas goes in, I let go, and wine comes out. So I can stop anytime simply by tipping up. The extra gas comes out, pull the needle out, and that's it. That's a Shotfire Ridge. 20 years on, 20 years on. 2002 Shotfire Ridge. Smells intact. So anyway, that's Coravin Timeless. High octane Aussie Shiraz, 20 years out. Lovely. And so then we advanced also to screw caps. So I love Okota. I love Australian wines. So we made a screw cap adapter. You simply crack the bottle open. When you open it, before you pour any wine, place our screw cap on top. Same material that was used in my implant is used in the top of this thing. Basically, it closes the bottle. So you can treat it like a cork, pass the needle through, tip, pour. Again, stop anytime. So you get the idea. And then finally, we developed Pivot, a really wonderful restaurant in Australia named the Stunned Mullet. Complained to me that Coravin is great, but it pours too slowly. The staff breaks the needle. They waste gas. And I don't need my wines to last for 20 years. I just need them to last a month. And so he said, can you make something that works with any closure, pours fast, takes no training, uses almost no gas? And I said, sure. And so developed Coravin Pivot. Pivot is a stopper. So like our screw cap, you replace the closure, whatever it is, and place ours. The stopper is made of the same material as in Coravin Sparkling. And so no oxygen in. We've got a cap at the top and a valve. Place the pivot through a valve at the top. We don't have to use a needle because it's a big honking tube that goes through a valve. Tip it sideways. You're not going to be able to see me pour this, but I've got a beautiful little sake cup because this is actually a bottle of sake, which uses a very strange closure. I press the button and trust me, it comes out in a hurry. So you can fill a glass in about 3 seconds, remove the pivot from the valve, close it. And just like sparkling and pivot, the wine lasts for at least a month. So it's not years, but it's at least a month. So that's it. That's what Coravin has as a product system. And I wanted to go through that quickly just so that you had the context of what we are and what we have now brought to the wine world. But the technology was hard. It was extremely difficult to do this. Even as an engineer, I have to tell you, sparkling was the hardest thing I've ever done. And I've done plasma fusion. Making a wine so you could blind taste it a month later down to the last glass against a just open bottle of sparkling wine, of the same sparkling wine, was nearly impossible. The different pressures we went through, the materials, all these different bottle sizes, that technical challenge was extraordinary, harder even than the original Timeless system. But that was not the hard part. The hard part was this mission. So that's our longevity. Pivot is a month. Sparkling wine is at least a month. Champagne's going longer. Pet Nat only goes a month. And then timeless is years plus. I mean, we were gonna revolutionize the way that the world drinks, enjoys, and serves wine. That meant we were going to be across the planet. So we were going to have a very large customer base. So we launched in the United States in 13, launched in Europe in 14, launched in Asia Pacific in 15. That's moving very fast for a company that was founded in 2011. And we have a headquarters in Boston where I live, a headquarters in Amsterdam, and we used to have a headquarters in Hong Kong. I'll speak to it later. We now have one in Australia. Not only do we want to launch to the entire world, we wanted this tool to be relevant more than just at home, the wine lovers like me. We knew that there was an opportunity to interact with wineries, with restaurants that serve great wines by the glass, with educators, and with the press and the critics. And we knew that if we wanted to launch globally and we wanted to speak to both the trade side and the consumer side, we had to, as a very small company, have a strategy. So how were we going to reach the 36 million Americans who drink wine, or the 80 to 100 million Europeans who drink wine? How are we going to reach them? It's an extremely expensive thing to advertise, to buy pages in the Wine Spectator, or to name your magazine across the world. Or to advertise on television, radio. It's insane. And so what we realized was that there was a sort of a hierarchy of influence. Wineries were at the top, restaurants were just beneath them, educators and the press and critics were just beneath them. They all spoke to each other, and all of them ultimately wanted to get to the wine room. And so we thought if we started at the winery and moved to the restaurant, the press and the educators would come, and that would ultimately get us in front of the restaurant. I'm sorry, the consumer at home. And so that was the strategy. I have to say, largely, it was a good one. Largely, it worked. So how do you convince these people that they should be on your side, and if anything, promoting you? How do you convince the winery? How do you convince the restaurant? How do you convince the press? And so I am a nerd, and Carl Sagan really shaped my young scientific life. And what he said something wonderful: extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And so I set out as an engineer in a very technical way of saying to the world, I'm just going to prove to you that it works. You're going to understand why it does what it does. And so I knew that I was going to run into two different kinds of skeptics. I was going to have technical skeptics that said, it doesn't actually do what you say it does. My God, 5 years of blind tasting, there's no way. But you needed that belief in order to change behavior. What I realized was Coravin is a change in behavior. To go from drinking a 750 milliliter with your spouse at home, which is how I started, to instead drinking a glass of champagne, a glass of white Burgundy, and a glass of, let's say it's Pinot Noir from Oregon on a Tuesday, is a change in behavior. And if you're going to go from a restaurant serving a Prosecco sparkling wine by the glass and maybe one champagne to serving 5 or 67, as 67 Palmol is doing now, or if you're going to be a restaurant that serves Domaine Romani Conti by the glass, how do you get somebody there from their happy and comfortable place? And so you've got to have a strategy for addressing the technical and the cultural skeptic. And I'll go through that a little bit. So I started a massive prospective blind randomized trial around the planet with top sommelier around the planet, with top winemakers around the planet. Name your city, I was there. Name your wine region, I was probably there in 2013 and 2014 and 2015. And it was the same sort of 5-glass test that we did. And we used wines from all over the world, and frequently wines of the producers and top wines in that country, and poured these to hundreds of wine professionals at various time points. That gave us a chance to interact with them, but also prove to them that it worked on different wine styles. Here's the nerdy outcome. Over 644 professionals, that number is more than doubled. since the launch of sparkling. 1,288 sets of wine, 56 different wines. And you can see the percentage that are correct. So it's around a 4 to 5% correct random guess rate of a 5-glass test. And you can see our numbers were statistically very similar to that out at various time points, whether it was red or white. And most importantly, none of the wines were oxidized, none of them were unservable, and none of the differences between the glasses were greater than bottle-to-bottle variability. And I hoped that this would help convince people that they should change their behavior, that the change in behavior was safe. I also knew from my work in medicine that when you have cultural skeptics, not database skeptics, but defenders of the tradition, that you don't run from that. You have two choices. You're either going to smash into them, like Uber smashing into the taxi industry, or you're going to try to work with them to shape this new behavior in the eyes of the traditional behavior that has existed since the 1600s, when the 750 milliliter was developed in the south of England to bottle incoming wine. The 750 milliliter with cork. So 400 years of tradition. My choice was not to smash against the tradition, but to meld into it. And so what you do, I found as an inventor, is you look for the loudest critic, the person who is the most insulting, most passionate about their hatred of you. That is the person you go to first. And so that job fell to Justin Leone of Tantris. Justin Leone of Tantris wrote a hate mail to a friend of his using, these are quotes from his hate mail. He was like, Mr. Lambrecht's cellar is a bunch of hormone-stuck piglets. He's the second shooter on the grassy knoll. This is a restaurant in Munich, by the way, and this is beautifully written in English. Coravin is a GMO of wine. It's the devil's spawn. It gets between wine and the consumer. Wine is meant to be consumed by the bottle. My God, what are you doing messing with this perfect volume? How dare you suggest bringing this into my temple, which was his restaurant, Tantris. It's a letter we keep on the wall at Coravin because, I immediately bought an airplane ticket to Munich, booked under a friend's name a table for one, and showed up at the restaurant and ordered the 9-glass pairing menu because I knew I would see the head sommelier. If I ordered the 9-glass pairing menu, it was likely I would see him. And so he came by glass 3 with a big frown. Glass 4, he accused me of being Mr. Lambrecht. He was correct. He asked me to leave if I had my Coravin with me, and I told him I did not. And I told him I just wanted to talk to him and listen. And so by glass 6, he was sitting down with me and drinking. By glass 13, the restaurant was closed. We went down to the basement, and his cellar in Tantris, which has, as you might expect, tens of thousands of bottles. And he, at 3 o'clock in the morning, pulls the cork on 6 different bottles of Riesling and said, "See, I don't care. It doesn't matter. We sell by the bottle." And so halfway through, now his staff is down, his girlfriend is there. We're all sort of drinking and on the floor. And I'm arguing against every one of his points and trying to make a counterpoint. And his girlfriend at the end settles the argument by yelling out, and pardon my cursing, she goes, "It's a fucking wrench. You use a wrench or you don't use a wrench. You don't hate a wrench." And so he looked at me and he goes, "Oh, okay." And so Justin was converted, and he wrote this and built what was a multiple award-winning wine by the glass program in Germany, probably the best by the glass program in Germany, I know, and I think he won best wine by the glass program in Europe for a couple of years. So it's important to listen to those cultural skeptics. He's still a very close friend. The other thing that I recognized was that not every country would react in the same way. California was like, "Great, it's a new tool, brand new stuff. We love new stuff." I have to say I went to France with some trepidation. And so 2 things that I learned. One, yes, there is resistance that is cultural. And secondly, not every country is a monoblock. France is at least 5 countries in terms of its reaction to Coravin. And so what I wanted to speak about just very quickly is what I learned through Coravin and through this effort to change behavior was it gave me a lens on every microculture in the world of wine. And that microculture was another thing that made wine so beautiful. It's not just the 140,000 bottles, it's the change in the year, every year that they're in the bottle. It's the personality and the individual personalities. It is, when they say terroir, it's not just land, it's the people, and they mean it. And their response is fascinating. So I wanted to give an example of France. I could do the same thing with Germany. I could do it with China. I could do it with Australia, or the UK. But I'll start with France because it was a fun one. It was early on. So very quickly, in 2013, after we launched in the United States, I went to Bordeaux and I went to Burgundy, in that order, and not knowing what to expect, but simply to demonstrate Coravin, give them one to test for themselves, show it to them so that they saw it first from me, before they saw it being used on their wine in a restaurant. And so these guys in Bordeaux were the defenders of the tradition. It even looks like a walled moat where they're going to be firing cannons at you from the tops of these towers. And I was walked to the gate by more than 2 or 3 of the first wineries that I met. I was told by one of the 5 Grand Cru Classé that they were going to put a block of metal underneath the foil to break every one of my needles. And I said to them, if you're going to change your packaging for me, I am honored. But that was the nature and intensity, ferocity of resistance. And then underneath that resistance was their question: who drinks wine by the glass? Doesn't make any sense. You drink it by the bottle. Is this going to reduce the sale of our wine? Because now you don't have to throw it away, use it for cooking, or you drink it even though you don't want it at the end of the night because the bottle is still open. And is Coravin in any way going to be used for counterfeiting? Still has never been done. So the answer is no. And the needles have existed since the 1800s, so you could have done it then. I will never speak about how, but they were fears. There was fear in Bordeaux of change. And so how do you change a region when there is fear? You got to do an inside job. And so it can't be me trying to convince them. I was lucky enough to have met Véronique Sanders of Aubailly. Aubailly and Véronique are universally loved in Bordeaux. And she was open-hearted and open-minded toward Coravin from the beginning. And her embrace of the technology at her own winery, her use of it with the press, and her embrace of it culturally led to multiple dinners at her winery with the folks from Aubryon, with the guys from Lynch Bage, with name the winery. She would invite them over. I would be there with Negociants, and we would be discussing Coravin and what it does. And through her effort and others, slowly over a long period of time, Bordeaux converted to being comfortable with Coravin. And there have been some really standout examples. Chateau Margaux, for example, used it very technically. Paul Pontellier is a very technical guy. Aurélien Valence, or was a very technical guy before he passed. Aurélien Valence, their head of marketing, he tested all wines before he sent them to an event. I think he was the first to do that because he didn't want to send bottles that were corked. He used it in recorking. So they do recorking every 20 years or whatever. And they used to open all these bottles and pour some out to taste them. And bottles would be open for a long time. And then they would recork and top up, or top up and recork. And then he started to use Coravin for it, and they would Coravin across all the bottles, figure out which one they were going to top up with. So the bottle was open for a second. So they were very technical in their approach. I got introduced to Chateau Latour, very stony and cold welcome, very technical and nerdy, which I loved. And so they started their own test and started tweeting it on Twitter. And so this was the results from the Foss machine, looking at one bottle, which is on the left-hand side, and all the measures that they took on the one bottle, and then any new bottle they opened every month to see whether or not there were any differences between the changing first bottle and the new bottles that they opened. And what they discovered was all of the changes in the one bottle they accessed 5 times over 5 months versus the other bottles that they were accessing across the way. All the changes in the first bottle were within bottle-to-bottle variability. So if you just opened 2 bottles of Chateau Latour, you would get the same variability as you got using Coravin. So that it took a long time. It took multiple approaches. It took an inside job to get the Bordeaux on my side. Burgundy was very different. I came to Burgundy from Bordeaux. I'd been walked out of wineries. First place that we went to was the top of the hill of Corton to meet Jean-Charles of Blanc-de-Martre. No longer there, obviously. And this lovely man welcomed us in. I demonstrated Coravin to him on a bottle of 1964 Coste d'Estournel because I'd just come from Bordeaux, and that was what I was using. So I'm pouring Bordeaux to a Burgundy guy, and he sees the demonstration and he looks at me, and I'm ready to get kicked out. And he said, "Can you wait here a moment?" And he walks away, comes back from the cellar with a bottle of 1991 Corton Charlemagne, and he said, "Can we use your system on this? This is the last wine my mother made. I don't have many left." And so I just started crying, right? It still makes me emotional. And that is the nature of Burgundy. They are artists, they are farmers, and they are friends. It is a friendship relationship. And they, they have no production is the other thing. And so they can't afford to open bottles for everybody that comes in the door. Whereas Bordeaux is like Kansas. I mean, they make so much wine. They've got to have a Chateau Latour, Fort Latour. I can't remember what their third wine is. They so much wine. They got to move the wine. These guys, there's a global fight to see how you can get an allocation of their wines. And so they have a different problem. They were into the idea of using Coravin to perfectly protect, but they wanted to know that it worked. And they're not going to do chemical analyses. They're going to do blind tastings. So some smiling friends, Charles Curtis, who introduced me to most of Burgundy. There's Jean-Marc Rouleau and Monsieur d'Angeville. And you can see the broad smiles on their faces. These are some of the bottles that we Coravin together at Le Cèdre, and then we would come back at various times out to 5 years and blind taste them. It wasn't one of the most nerve-wracking experiences of my life, but they just wanted to believe that it worked, and if it worked, they would use it. And so Burgundy adopted Coravin very rapidly, unlike Bordeaux. So they were within months. Bordeaux took a decade. And so not every country was the same. And that is a story I could tell you about Germany. The winemakers accepted, the restaurants did not. London, restaurants accepted very, very quickly, and probably more than anybody else in the world, just like Sydney, Australia, and most of Australia. Japan, very conservative. China, Beijing, open bottle throwdown culture. Shanghai, they'll drink anything from anywhere and want to learn just like I do. So every country is different. And that has been the greatest learning experience for me as Coravin, and the greatest joy. Then there are the restaurants. So we took this argument to the restaurant. We had measured the results at multiple restaurants around the world that had been early users of Coravin, and they saw a 10 to 30% increase in wine sales, just in wine sales, right? Bottle and glass, 10 to 30% increase in their fine wine sales and wine sales overall. We've done this test innumerable times in now many, many countries. It's always the same. You start to offer fine wines by the glass, your revenue in wine goes up. Even though you're not selling these bottles, but if you're selling a great glass of wine, you're not only making your guest happy, you're also increasing your margin. We eliminate waste in the restaurant. The pandemic was the greatest test of Coravin efficacy. 67 Pall Mall has over 900 wines by the glass. They were shut down for 15 months. So they had 900 accessed wines shut down for 15 months. They came back and sampled through them all. They lost 2 or 3 bottles. So, waste reduction eliminated, very true with sparkling wine, and customer satisfaction. You make a memory. Restaurants were easier to convert, but I have to say the same sort of cultural resistance, right? California, San Diego, San Francisco, easy. Paris, really hard. Sydney, easy. London, easy. Japan, really hard, right? So it's these various cultures that you have to deal with and have a strategy for. But slowly but surely, great wine programs have launched. Noble Rot, 67 Pall Mall being two of the real finest. Anytime Grant Ashton opens a 67 Pall Mall in the country, we see a sales burst, which is amazing. The Stunned Mullet north of Sydney. He's the guy who's basically forced me to invent most things in Coravin since launch. There's Tantris in Munich still using Jungsik in Seoul. I just went there. What an amazing restaurant. Wine Universe in Shanghai. So really name your country. We're everywhere by the glass. And there's been incredible creativity from the sort of basic stuff that people do all over the world. 5 whites, 5 reds, 5 sparkling, 2 or 3 sticky wines, having a Coravin selection, 2 pairings and flights like the Sondis Taïwan. This is a brilliant list that I saw at a restaurant in Miami called Macchialina. I've also seen it in Australia. Everything by the half bottle and full bottle, and by the glass. And so what they do is when they serve you a half bottle, they take a bottle, they Coravin the first half out, and then they leave the bottle on your table, closed, and you drink the bottle or you drink the half bottle. When they sell the second half, they pull the cork and sell the second half. So it's a brilliant, creative way of doing it. They also serve very nice wines. And then we've, resulted in lots of by the glass winning wine programs around the world. George Miliotis, Master of Wine, or Master Sommelier, has won multiple fine wine by the glass programs. There's even for Wine Star Awards, there's a Coravin award, Coravin by the Glass award that they do, which is great, instigated by them. So the restaurant acceptance has been wonderful. We don't have a whole lot of data on the consumer. We do know that depending upon the country, our consumer usage is anywhere between 50% and 90% of our sales. And it depends on the country and the culture. France and the United States are oddly very similar. Restaurants are harder than the consumer. So in the US, we're about 80% consumer, US and France, 80% consumer, 20% trade. Whereas in London, we're 50% consumer, 50% trade. Sydney is very similar to London. And so the culture makes a difference in how and where Coravin winds up being used. I wanted to give you a quick sense in my last couple of minutes on how the world impacts us and how the world impacts the world of wine. So 11 years is long enough for a lot of stuff to happen. Obviously, the war between Russia and Ukraine, right? You wouldn't know that that would affect everything, but it does. It's made Europe conservative on spending cash on expensive wine. Russia shelled our wine importer, our Coravin importer, in Kyiv, like within the first week of the war, and wiped out a lot of really great wine and Coravin. So we pulled out of Russia and restored all of the product to Ukraine. We walked away from millions in Russia because of what they did. China, right? When I came into China, when you think about 2011 through 13, I mean, Bordeaux could do no wrong in China. The sales in China were skyrocketing. It was our number 5th country and it was growing like mad. Then pandemic and politics hit and wine has collapsed by about 40%. Politics went sideways. We had a headquarters in Hong Kong, the expectation of growing into China. The politics in Hong Kong have gotten so bad. You can imagine me with very little verbal filter. I could get arrested and deported to China, to mainland China, for saying things like, I think Taiwan's a lovely country. So, you can't say stuff like that. So we shut down our headquarters and moved out. The Suez Canal, you remember that boat that went sideways? Well, we're a global country, our company. We had a boat right behind that boat. All of our product for the holidays was stuck in the Suez Canal. You would never think of that as somebody in the wine world, but it wasn't just our boat. Luckily, our stuff isn't perishing. But I feel bad for anybody who had wine in that boat or in the boats behind the Suez Canal. And then the global shift to direct-to-consumer and online purchasing. So when we started selling, we were about 80% wine store retail, 80% in-store. Companies like Bed Bath & Beyond in the United States, Harrods in London, name name your store in Berlin or Sydney, that was the dominant form of sale to the consumer. The consumer has moved online. They were moving online when we started. And so direct to consumer in the wine industry and direct to consumer in the consumer product industry has really changed since 2011 to 13. Everything. And changed the way that we do business. So we need to build a relationship with our customers. So the importance of social media, the importance of direct to consumer communication just skyrocketed over the course of the last 11 years. And then hard to ignore the global pandemic, right? So Coravin, March 2020, sales to restaurants, millions of dollars. March of 2020. April of 2020, sales to restaurants, $435. So you're a small private company and a whole group of your customers just disappeared. You're a little bit in a state of panic, controlled panic, because this is outside of your control. So you got to control yourself. What changed, though, obvious in retrospect, is the consumption of fine wine at home skyrocketed, as we now all know. Sales of wine went through the roof. Sales of Coravin went through the roof. The desire to replicate the experience in the restaurant at home with good bread, learning how to cook, learning how to pair wines, taste wines, drink wines, wine education in the consumer, increased the by the glass desire at home. Coravin sales went up counterintuitively. And our goal since the pandemic is to be to hold those consumers while returning into the restaurant. And things will keep changing. For example, this. So the World Health Organization coming out and saying no level of alcohol consumption is safe for our health. It's like you're drinking asbestos, right? And this is what they have told the young wine community. And so as a medical guy, I feel like it's my responsibility to try to tease out what the data actually means. And so I've read through many of the studies. And unlike tobacco, where, you could do a trial of 10 people and pick up on the health impacts of cigarettes, you've got to dig deep and tease out confounding factors to find the negative impact of wine on your health span and your lifespan. But sadly, it is there. What they don't put into context, however, is the scale of additional risk. And that's because that doesn't serve the news industry or Instagram or TikTok or clickbait. What serves them is explosive headline, no level of alcohol consumption is safe. This stuff's going to kill you. And so it's our job to put it into context. And I'll go to the impact on Coravin in just a sec. Reading through all the articles, basically what I saw was for a woman to drink a glass of wine every day of the week, and for a man to drink 2 glasses of wine every day of the week, results in a shortening of lifespan of about 2.5 months. And so, you look at cigarettes, smoking cigarettes every day is like 5 to 7 years off your life, if not more. And so 2.5 months at the end of my life, I'm willing to give that up. I'm okay. Coravin has added 2.5 months worth of great life experience to me. Wine has added at least 2.5 months of great life to me. And so they failed to put it in context. We're going to try to help. And then I think the other thing that is, again, counterintuitive, wine consumption has gone down. Fine wine consumption has finally started to go down, albeit from quite high levels. But wine by the glass has gone up. Wine by the glass has gone up in the restaurant. It's going up at the home. And so why is that? People are drinking less but better. If you're going to continue to drink wine, despite these negative headlines in health, what we've seen is people are drinking wines that they really love. They're drinking in smaller quantities. So less but better is a path that actually helps Coravin. So mistakes that were made. What do I regret in the last 10 years? We missed a customer, and they were an important one. Distributors and importers, particularly in the United States, had no idea they existed. I'm not from the wine industry, didn't know what I was doing. If I didn't see them, they didn't exist. I didn't see distributors and importers in my wine love as a consumer. Wine distributors and importers are the go-betweens between restaurants and wineries. If we changed anybody's life, it was theirs. They used to open a bottle and they would time their day and their meetings around when they opened that bottle. No longer. Now they could serve whatever the heck they wanted to sample. They could sample it to anybody they wanted with zero cost of waste. They started to show better wines to more people because they didn't have to leave the bottle behind. They could show it the next day. We changed their lives. We, however, never talked to them, didn't meet them in the United States, barely, and certainly didn't teach them how to use our product. And so they wound up showing wineries and restaurants how to use it, however they had figured out how to use it. And so a lot of the misuse of Coravin that has been promulgated around the planet has come from these poor guys who we ignored. My bad, trying to make up for it now. And they serve an important role. The other thing we did, my God, if you received Coravin early on and made your way through the hieroglyphics of how to use Coravin, bless you. We were catastrophic in our instructions for use. And you know, if you poured the glass, you probably did something that you might have damaged the bottle. And so I train absolutely everyone now. Coravin is a tool. You have to use it appropriately. Most people think of it as a corkscrew. It's not. It's a wine glass. It touches wine. You have to wash it. Clean your Coravin. Clean, clear, and cellar. Hot water through here cleans it at the end of use, end of day. Not between glasses, but at the end of the day, make sure you wash it. If you haven't ever washed your Coravin, please pour vodka down the spout. I was just in Sweden, and while I was giving the speech, the restaurant owner was pouring vodka into a Coravin we haven't sold in many years, and he's like, yep, you know, never washed it. If you don't wash it, you can inject Brettanomyces, Saccharomyces, Acetobacter that's been growing out in there into your next wine. Don't do that. And then finally, clear. Clear is a little bit of a complex concept. Nice bottle of Aubailly because I love Veronique. So clear, I have a little bit of Shotfire Ridge Shiraz still in this needle from my last pour. And I don't want to inject that oxidizing in the needle Shotfire Ridge Shiraz into my next bottle. And so what do? I give the trigger a quick press just before I move. All that wine comes out of the needle gets filled with argon, and now it's safe to go into the next bottle. That's what we call clearing. Clean, clear, and then cellar, store the wine on its side, keep it cold. Argon does not retard the evolution of wine, but it also doesn't protect it from heat, light, and vibration. So please store your wines on their side. Coravin Sparkling, you just have to rinse it. The stopper, Coravin Pivot, same thing, just rinse the stopper and pour some water down the spout again at the end of the evening. And
Greg, can I break in here? We have about 5 minutes left, and there are some people with questions, so I want to make sure we get to them. Just FYI.
I am done. These are some stats on us. Sold millions of devices, served over 280 million glasses of wine. Think about that. Total number of people whose lives we've touched, around 280 million. A glass of wine is poured with Coravin every second of every day. Kind of a crazy stat. Our latest and last thing, we're doing the Coravin World Wine Tour. We've recognized we're at this weird center of a Venn diagram of wineries, importers and distributors, and restaurants. And at that center is the consumer as well. And so we are finally going all over the world and combining all of our friends and working with restaurants and importers and wineries to offer epic wines by the glass to the consumers at a decreased price so that people can experience some of these great wines. We're going to be doing this twice a year in many countries every year to try to sort of spread this joy. And that's it. Sorry, I ran over.
Excellent. No, thank you very much. I just want to make sure there's been some interesting observations. There's been a lot of praise for the system from a number of people. So you can look at the chat about that. But Neil Hulkar had a question early on about the Diam capsule. Neil, do you want to unmute and ask Greg your question?
Yeah, I hear that There's a problem with the DM corks resealing after using the Coravin. Can you comment about that?
On corks resealing?
Yeah, the
Yeah,
DM, yeah,
so,
The agglomerated, the DM agglomerated.
oh, the DMs, yeah.
yeah.
So cork is natural tissue. DM is a conglomerated, natural and artificial. However, it does reseal. The problem is it reseals slower. So there's two things that its construct as well as its temperature. A really cold cork also reseals slower.
Mm.
A really old cork also reseals slower. So if you've got an old, cold DM, it's going to take 3 to 5 minutes for the cork to reseal. And so with a DM, I leave the cork standing upright and the bottle standing upright for 5 to 10 minutes before putting it back on its side in the cellar. So that's a critical piece of information. So we are dependent upon the cork, but it's old, cold, and DM. One other thing about cork, just very quickly, you can check to see the integrity and quality of your cork from a resealability standpoint outside of plastic by wrapping your hand around the neck, putting your thumb on top, and pushing down. If the cork moves, don't use Coravin Timeless. The cork has lost its elasticity and will not reseal.
Great, thank you, thank you. Leon Ainsworth had a number of questions and observations and about the longevity of wine, and using Model 3, about managing cellars. Leon, do you want to maybe just whichever questions you want to pose to Greg?
Feel free.
Thank you. Thank you, Greg. I'll just pick one really. It's all around the Coravin 3 really, because I bought that, I don't know, 2-3 years ago now, as part of doing my diploma at Westset. And it was one of those that after doing a tasting, you start hearing things. I mean, again, look, it's the grapevine, excuse the pun. But in terms of people saying that actually by using it, you may only get 4 weeks or 3 months out of it before it actually starts impacting the sort of structure and the flavors, etc. So at that point, I've now been quite hesitant to use it on some more of my sort of Bordeaux's on that side, and I tend to just open the whole bottle now, which obviously is what I'd prefer to avoid. Can you comment on the Model 3? Is that still in line with your timeless sort of findings in terms of it'll last for 10 to 20 years, or should I actually upgrade, dare I say, and pass my Model 3 off to somebody else?
No. So all Coravin models 3 and 6, which are the two timeless that we're selling now, use the same needle, same pressure, same gas. So there's no difference in the performance of 3 and 6. So I just canceled myself a sale. And I use the Model 3 at home all the time. So the needle is identical to the needle that I used to do all of that testing so long ago. And so what I find is two things: longevity of wine, clean, clear cellar. Make sure you do those things. Wash your Coravin at the end of a night, any night you use it. Clear. Press the trigger just before you go to the next bottle, to basically fill the needle with argon gas and clear out any wine that's on the inside of it. Particularly important for low sulfur natural wines and for older wines. So quick press the trigger just before you go into the next bottle. And cellar, store it on its side, keep it cold. So no, I mean, it's Model 3 was what was being used by 67 Pall Mall when they shut down for 15 months. So it's the same system. I do, however, there was one side I canceled, and it's called placebo effect. I find the more that somebody knows about wine, the more they're convinced that the wine has changed under Coravin. It hasn't oxidized, but it's lost its verve, its lift, its energy, its pizzazz. And I've heard this from a lot of people in the wine profession. I've always wondered what verve, lift, and energy tasted like. But you know, I've held blind tastings with people that have believed this, with the wine that they believed had changed, and a control bottle of the same wine. And the bottle that they knew had changed, now they're blind tasting against the control bottle, and they can't find a difference. And so the change was in their head. The second word in placebo effect is effect. If you believe it has changed, it has changed, whether or not it has actually changed. And so I don't know how to better address this placebo effect thing other than doing these blind tastings I do with people around the world, and we're going to start doing them again. But I encourage you, if you've got a bottle that you believe has changed, hopefully you have another bottle of the same wine, have somebody pour you at least a triangle test, if not a 4-glass test, where you don't know how many are from the bottle that was previously accessed, and just recalibrate your brain on, is it actually changing? Because that is what I went through, and so I know that it works over years, but not everybody has gone through that, and placebo effect is an effect. So
okay, thank you. There's just two more questions for people who had comments that they want to bring up with you. One, Machik Krupa, a question about repairing the unit.
If your Coravin isn't working, we'll replace it. So repair, you can repair the needle. There are some things or you can replace the needle. So it just unscrews. If you've broken it or damaged it, unscrews, take it out, you can get a new one. You can also clean the system. That helps a lot in terms of its function, if you've never cleaned it. And then we can clean the intersection between the capsule cup where the gas goes in and the Coravin, if we're talking about sparkling. But if it's doing something else, like it's leaking, first make sure you have an authentic capsule, and we can teach you how. But if it's leaking, then something on the inside is damaged. We have an under a 1% return rate. And so we've got a very generous policy of repair and return. So just let us know.
Do they reach out to customer service? Is it obvious on the website within your?
It is customer service.
Great. Okay, great. And then finally, thank you for that. Patricia Stefanovic, do you want to come on and?
Yeah, thanks. Actually, Greg, I was going to say that as you are inevitably aware, being a technical guy, corks are different. And occasionally I slice open a cork just to see the lenticels.
Yeah.
Because if I have one bottle that is poor, then I want to know why. And the size and shape of the lenticels in the cork will inevitably make a difference. So if someone were doing that tasting and they found a difference, it might not be the Coravin. In fact, it probably isn't. It's probably the cork.
You are absolutely correct. When a bottle truly oxidizes, there has been a failure of the interaction between the Coravin and the cork. And yeah, corks lose their elasticity as they get older. Corks are highly variable quality. You know, there are better corks. I got to tell you, Costestinel was one of the guys that walked me out when I first went to Bordeaux. I had a vertical of 12 years of Costestinel. I was serving to any of my friends when they came over. Any 3 years they wanted. I loved the wine, and then they walked me out. I was so devastated. But those guys use the best cork on the planet. I mean, that thing is unbelievable. It's this short, but it's super elastic. I don't know where the trees are, but you know, everybody should use them. So, and then I've run into, you know, Piemontese corks where they take a rigid dark cork and of infinite length and stuff it into the neck of a bottle under maximum compression, and then the cork fails for lack of elasticity. So you're absolutely right. We're subject to the tyranny of the cork. That's one of the reasons why I invented Pivot. Pivot uses our own stopper. You pull the closure, and that's our fault now if the wine oxidizes. So if you see technological evolution of Coravin, it's going to be difficult to see it, but my goal is to be able to make a pivot stopper not protect the wine for a month, but to protect the wine for years. If we can beat the cork, I would love to.
Thank you. I'm sorry. That was me being the techie person.
No,
Yeah, we love it.
Very serious. And I agree with you with cost because the Pratts are really good friends.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, Greg, thank you very much. That was fascinating. We've had many comments in the chat say how grateful they are for this talk and very informative. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your presentation.
Thank you guys, and I really appreciate the time to think and speak about this presentation and also discuss with you. Always appreciate the questions, and thank you so much for your interest and for getting the word out there. And let's keep this wonderful world of wine going for another, whatever, 400 years in bottle and 8,000 years in history.